See, Gabbard had some strong words recently for Anthony Fauci and his lying shenanigans. But first, let's watch one of these ridiculous videos. We can't listen to the sound really because we'll get blocked for listening to the music. But let's all remember the pandemic that wasn't, where all these medical professionals, I don't even know if that's what they are, really, bunch of actors pretending to be, started dancing in the middle of an alleged pandemic. And this is just going on everywhere. It doesn't make any sense. It makes no sense at all why any of this would be happening if we were actually living through a mass, pandemic. It's just ridiculous that people had these videos and these people dancing at in a hospital. What is going on? This is just ridiculous. These people are acting absolutely preposterous. Taking up resources, wasting time. It's ludicrous. Let's not forget that people don't even talk about it anymore. People don't even talk about that stuff happen anymore. People are still having, COVID dances. This is recent. It's ludicrous. So they're having a little salsa with masks on. It says this is happening at Columbia University, despite all this nonsense ending decades ago. These people are still wearing masks. Makes no sense. They're probably socialists. All right, let's see. Well, first we'll see this. Dr. Fauci repeatedly pleads the fifth and his lawyer is thrown out in Senate hearing. Bombshell from the New York Post. Fauci invokes Fifth Amendment 111 times. Nice of him to stop right at that nice number of 111 so we can keep on quoting it. But it is just ridiculous. It's just absolutely ridiculous. Here's what Tulsi had to say. Fauci's performance today made me sick, smug, arrogance, zero remorse, zero accountability. He refused to answer a single question. Let's hear what she has to say.
Before the COVID pandemic, Dr. Fauci, as head of the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases, provided millions in U.S. taxpayer dollars to fund dangerous gain-of-function research on bat coronaviruses at the Wuhan Institute of Virology, work which is now widely viewed as the source of the unintentional lab leak that sparked the pandemic. Now, in support of President Trump's maximum transparency mandate, today, on my final day as Director of National Intelligence, I'm releasing never-before-seen communications and documents that expose exactly how Fauci worked with politicized career leadership in the intelligence community to suppress the truth about his actions, the virus's lab leak origins, and his role in directing U.S. funding for this dangerous research that caused immeasurable harm and countless lost lives. Now, these documents expose Fauci's direct role in influencing and manipulating IC assessments on COVID-19 and how Fauci lied to Congress in 2024 when under oath he denied knowledge of or participation in discussions with intelligence officials about viral research. We also received testimony from multiple intelligence community whistleblowers who reported retaliation for challenging the intelligence community's manipulation of intelligence on the virus's origins, once again revealing a clear pattern of suppressing dissent, silencing critics, and burying the truth. Dr. Fauci's close relationships with the intelligence community enabled him to assume three key roles that shield him from scrutiny. First, Dr. Fauci funded dangerous gain-of-function coronavirus research linked to Big Pharma and their pursuit of universal vaccines worth trillions of dollars. Second, Dr. Fauci was the behind-the-scenes advisor who, alongside his hand-picked so-called experts, pushed the intelligence community to endorse a natural animal origin to hide his dangerous gain-of-function research that he funded using taxpayer dollars, all of this in a deliberate attempt to cover up the truth and shift the blame and attention away from Fauci's own actions. Third, Dr. Fauci became the nation's pandemic pundit, and he publicly pushed lies, disinformation, and censorship using every platform available. Now, according to hundreds of reviewed emails, which are included in this release, The intelligence community almost always incorporated Fauci's recommendations. He promoted a fraudulent paper whose publication he helped prompt as legitimate information for intelligence community consideration. Senior analysts praised Dr. Fauci not as a policymaker, but as what they called an unbiased guide to the real coronavirus experts, while deliberately ignoring experts who might dissent from Fauci's narratives. Now, Fauci didn't stop there. He blatantly lied to Congress under oath during his 2024 testimony to the House Select Subcommittee on the Coronavirus Pandemic, denying that he ever spoke to any intelligence agency about COVID. Now, the correspondence I'm releasing today directly contradicts his sworn testimony. Now, we received statements from multiple whistleblowers revealing that the intelligence analysts who dared to challenge Dr. Fauci's COVID origin conclusions faced threats of retaliation, marginalization, and many suffered career setbacks. For example, a contractor was terminated just days after coming forward to ODNI as a whistleblower. Another example, those who advocated for the lab leak hypothesis or expressed dissenting views were reminded by their managers that leadership would determine which analysts would be promoted and which would not. The message was clear: go along or be punished. Senior leaders also sought to undermine whistleblowers by removing anonymity, which is required in the whistleblower process, as they made their complaints, and also insisting that their managers or attorneys be present during ODNI meetings where these whistleblowers were coming forward with their testimony, obviously creating an atmosphere of intimidation. The COVID pandemic caused tremendous hardship and pain for millions of our fellow Americans and countless people around the world. Now, after years of lies and censorship and cover-ups, the American people deserve transparency, truth, and accountability. The tactics that were used to hide the truth are straight from the deep state playbook. Politicized self-serving leaders like Dr. Fauci covered up their own wrongdoing and abuses of power, manipulated intelligence, lied to Congress, and undermined a duly elected president by restricting his access to the vital facts he needed to keep the country safe. It's time you know the truth.
All right. That was good. All right, let's watch another quick video. Today I'm releasing never before seen intelligence revealing new evidence of past U.S. government's funding for more than 120 biolabs in over 30 countries. Now, this video is a bit older, but it gives us a reference point. So this was published by Tulsi on June 12th, 2026.
After months of searching through intelligence community holdings and files, today I'm releasing new evidence of long-standing U.S. government funding of more than 120 biolabs in over 30 countries. Now, these biolabs include labs in places like Ukraine, which could be at risk of compromise due to the ongoing Russia-Ukraine war. In fact, the intelligence community had previously warned that a U.S.-funded biolab in Ukraine likely housed dangerous pathogens and remained vulnerable to long-standing threats of Russian attack, seizure, or damage. Now, until now, evidence regarding the full existence and funding of these laboratories had been knowingly withheld from you, the American people. Many of these U.S. government-funded biolabs are currently or have previously engaged in research using hazardous and highly contagious pathogens, and in some cases included dangerous gain-of-function research with very little visibility or oversight. Now, President Trump clearly understands the serious threat dangerous gain-of-function research poses to the American people. And this is why he took decisive action over a year ago. On May 25th, 2025, he signed an executive order to end federal funding of gain-of-function research around the world. Here at ODNI, I issued new guidance to the intelligence community directing increased collection on these laboratories and facilities overseas. And we're already seeing the results of this increased collection. We're learning new details, for example, on clinical trials that are underway at these facilities and that are raising significant ethical, financial, and security concerns regarding the supposed public health initiatives and U.S. national security. Now, despite the obvious potential for catastrophic global impact that research on dangerous pathogens in biolabs can have, politicians and so-called health professionals like Dr. Fauci, as well as entities within the Biden administration's national security team, lied repeatedly to the American people about the existence of U.S.-funded and supported biolabs. Not only did they lie, they threatened those who attempted to expose the truth. So this release today breaks new ground, as the information surrounding the existence, history, locations, and funding of these U.S.-funded biolabs has been intentionally covered up by very powerful people who falsely claimed that these biolabs didn't exist. Now, they accused anyone who says otherwise to be foreign assets and traitors to America. Now, Odie and I will continue working closely with partners across the U.S. government to identify exactly where these labs are and what pathogens they contain to end dangerous gain-of-function research that threatens the health and well-being of the American people and people around the world.
Wow. And this video got 43 million views. People are adamant about figuring this sort of thing out or canceling it completely. And Rand Paul writes, instant repost, which is kind of funny. So, yeah, and here's one more. CNN spent years protecting Fauci. When Tulsi Gabbard, which is relevant to this other post right here from Clandestine. So, in other words, the Biden administration, the MSM, entities within our government and powerful NGOs were all lying, and I was right. A lot of us were. When Tulsi released documents, they immediately went into damage control mode. Okay, so let's watch this clip from CNN and their made-up stories.
Funded Wuhan lab research that sparked COVID. It's a reference to gain-of-function research, but these files, you say, fall far short of proving her allegations.
Far short, especially on that last big claim. Nothing in these documents comes even close to proving that Dr. Fauci had a role in the origination of the pandemic. In fact, the documents don't contain any definitive answer. The documents don't contain any definitive answer whatsoever on the still unresolved question of where COVID came from. So certainly no proof that the virus emerged from this research in Wuhan, China, that got money from the U.S. National Institutes of Health. Now, the first document, Boris, in the files is interesting. It's heavily redacted, but it's an analysis from a federally funded lab in May 2020 that argues that the Wuhan lab had all of the necessary conditions in mid to late 2019 for an accidental release of a lab-modified virus. The analysis put equal weight on the theory that COVID-19 came from a lab modification as it did on a natural outbreak or a lab leak from a natural virus. So that is certainly ammunition. It's valid ammunition for the people out there who felt like officials like Fauci were unduly dismissive of the lab leak theory at the time, maybe now. But even this analysis, which, by the way, was described in the media 5 years ago, didn't even try to conclusively prove where COVID came from. And other documents in this same package released by Gabbard make clear that the intelligence community didn't know for sure. One official said in a September 2020 email that, quote, "We do not see compelling evidence that China deliberately manufactured this virus, and there is no intelligence community consensus on whether an accidental lab release of a natural strain or a natural outbreak is more likely." And an official argues in a 2023 email that the 2020 analysis doesn't actually substantiate its claim that the Wuhan lab had all of the necessary conditions for a release of a lab-modified virus. So there is certainly debate in these documents about the origins of COVID. It's sometimes interesting, but there's no proof and certainly no Fauci-related smoking gun.
But to that point, Gabbard also claimed that Fauci lied to Congress back in 2024. Is there proof of that?
There is not. The Fauci comment in question, Boris, came at the end of a messy exchange that is much less clear-cut than Gabbard made it out to be. So what is this claim even about? Well, Gabbard's team explained on that website that she was talking about 6 words that Fauci uttered in this 2024 hearing. They said Fauci was asked in his testimony if he'd ever spoken to any U.S. intel agencies, quote, concerning viral research before, during, or after the COVID pandemic. They said he dodged the question and then answered, "Not to my knowledge," about COVID. And the newly released documents do show Fauci made at least one brief comment in a meeting with the CIA about an academic paper on COVID research. So is that case closed, smoking gun? No, because if you actually go back and watch the tape or read the transcript of that testimony, you'll see it's much more complicated. So Fauci had been talking about having discussed bioweapons with intel agencies around the time of the anthrax attacks of 2001, before a Republican congressman interjected and said, sure, but not as related to, say, COVID-19. And Dr. Fauci said,
reading.
not to my knowledge, about COVID.
This guy's been stuttering through the whole video, despite the fact that he's literally just reading. I mean, come on. It's ridiculous. We know that CNN's lying, especially since the journals have come out and they've told us so much more about what's going on. It says here, Fauci's diary wasn't leaked, stolen, or hacked. It wasn't even private. Senator Kennedy breaks down exactly how he uncovered it. So let's check this out. Kennedy's a hero
put
here.
On government servers.
Yeah, well, every American knows this who has a job. If you go into your office and the company that you work for gives you a laptop, and you do work on that laptop, it belongs to the company. And that is true. That is federal law. If you do something on a government server, it belongs to the government. So he was keeping a diary for the book that he intended to write about his life. And at the end of his term, just before he was leaving, he emailed the entire diary to himself. So for years and years of keeping this daily journal, he emailed it to himself so that he could write his book, and that's how we found it, through those emails.
But he knows that. I mean,
it's not a diary. It's not a diary in the sense, like you said, that a teenage girl keeps a diary that's private and has a lock on it. This is a government computer, a government laptop on government time, keeping this account of what his official duties are, and then making private observations about them. The liberal media is now feigning indignation that we released private diaries and violated his privacy, but it's a crazy assertion. And, what they're really doing is covering up this, what you pointed out, this vast media malpractice that took place during COVID, when they elevated this guy to a deified status, who had funded the weaponization of coronavirus, who then had given it to a Chinese military-run lab, to two scientists there, Xi Jinping and Ben Hu, who further weaponized it using NIH technology that they got from another NIH grantee, Ralph Barrick at the University of North Carolina.
Yeah.
And they created SARS-CoV-2, and Ben Hu, who was seen as a second scientist on it, is patient zero. So he was the first person to get sick from COVID-19. And then, if you look at the subway line that goes from the Wuhan lab, all the original cases were on that subway line. So these scientists were infected. They were getting on the subway. People were getting infected, at each stop along the way. And that subway led right from the Wuhan lab to the airport. So people then spread it internationally.
All right, there's a video from Glenn Beck. You might check out the rest of that later on. This guy just has no idea what he's talking about. He just seems like a complete waste of time. Let's see what... I lost my place there. What Rand Paul has to say. We have... he's on Benny Johnson's podcast saying, Rand Paul will give a mountain of evidence against Dr. Fauci to Florida Attorney General to prosecute Fauci on state charges after Florida announces investigation. Right? DeSantis is unhappy, and we can't blame him. It's ridiculous.
I did have a question for you about a new revelation that we have here in the state of Florida. Breaking news that the Attorney General in the state of Florida, James Uthmeyer, is looking at prosecuting potentially Dr. Fauci for his crimes based on Florida law that would not be covered by a federal pardon from Joe Biden. What is your take on this? Have you had any outreach from the Attorney General of Florida?
We're happy to share our information with anybody. Most of the things that we had looked at that we believed were breaking a federal law were destroying records, which is a federal law, lying to Congress, which is a federal law, and now what we're contemplating is sending a referral to the Department of Justice for obstruction of a congressional investigation. So those are very federal. I don't know right offhand what the state charges would be. We're open to cooperating. We have a mountain of evidence, and we're more than willing to share it with people who wish. We've been sharing most of it, frankly, with the public. We've been putting as much out there as possible so people can make up their own mind. Plus, there's 1,000,001 people like yourself and other sleuths that will go through this and find things that maybe even we didn't find.
So you are encouraging state AGs to potentially take up this issue.
This is amazing. I would love to see Florida do exactly this. I mean, Ron DeSantis has really been calling out Fauci as of late. Says Fauci calling him a jerk in his private diary is one of his proudest movements as governor. I love it. Let's see what he has to say here.
Come down to Florida and do TV hits on local news attacking me for mandating that schools be open, for allowing restaurants to function and all this other stuff. And he would even host conference calls with mayors and counties as a way to circumvent our policies and to impose mandates, and we blocked it. And there was one of the most proud things that I can say since I've been governor is reading the diary entry, where he was attacking me for blocking local mask mandates that he was trying to engineer around our back. And so I think it was a disgraceful performance. He did do that. But, in fairness, we were hitting him very hard when he was still pretty popular. He was like a demigod for the first few months of COVID. When you went against Fauci, the media would say, and they would always say, the governor's breaking with Fauci. He's not listening to the science. And Fauci very much considered himself to represent science. So any pronouncement he made, if you disagreed with that, even if you had all the data in the world, you don't believe in the science. And the legacy media really advanced that narrative. And so we had a lot of tussles. I was probably on the wrong side of public opinion at the time. Now I think people look back and they do recognize how wrong he was, but how destructive he was. I think he's probably the most destructive bureaucrat in the history of the United States of America.
That is a great statement. Love to hear from Ron DeSantis. That's just good stuff. And DeSantis has been really calling out Fauci as of late, like I said earlier. So you can check out his profiles. I think this is his official one, so he doesn't have as many of his private personal comments on there. But it's definitely worth checking out to see what he's got going on. And thanks for watching the video. So this far, like, share, comments really help with the algorithm. Have a fantastic day.